From Washington, the McLaughlin Group, the American original. For over 3 decades, the sharpest minds, best sources, hardest talk.
Welcome back again. Today we have 2 very special guests. Jill Lawrence from USA Today. Welcome, Jill. Thank you. And Ben Domenech from The Federalist. Ben, welcome.
Good to be with you.
And Clarence is away this week. But anyway, we will get back to the main story. So, issue 1, Sessions Showdown.
President Trump again lashed out at his Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, this week. The president is furious with Mr. Sessions over what he says is the latter's quote-unquote disgraceful assignment of authority over an investigation into the handling of Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act or FISA warrants to the Justice Department's Inspector General. But note this, offering a sharply worded rebuke, Sessions pledged that, quote, as long as I am the Attorney General, I will continue to discharge my duties with integrity and honor, and this department will continue to do its work in a fair and impartial manner according to the law and Constitution, end quote.
Pat, why, as the president keeps criticizing Jeff Sessions, why hasn't he fired him if he doesn't like him so much?
Well, he'd have real problems if he fired him. He'd get Rod Rosenstein as then Attorney General, and if he fired him, he could have trouble getting somebody through the Senate. But let me say this. The president has an argument here. He's being investigated by Mueller. Sessions has recused himself. Mueller's all over his case. Trump believes he didn't do any collusion. At the same time, you got this Steele, who's a British agent working with Russian intelligence.
Former officer and agent are different.
Working with Russian intelligence, paid for by Hillary and the NSC, and colluding with the FBI. And Sessions will not investigate him, and all he says is, let's turn this over to the IG at Justice. So you understand Trump's exasperation and rage, which is beyond the normal.
Okay, Eleanor.
It is beyond the normal, and mocking Mr. Sessions as Mr. Magoo, he's hoping to ridicule him to the extent that he actually quits so he doesn't have to fire him. You know, sometimes in these perilous times you find heroes where you least expect to find them, and so far the Attorney General is standing up very well.
He's a hero?
He's a hero for me, yes. And the picture that he took over a restaurant meal at Centrella, what is the fancy restaurant across the street?
Michelle Richard.
No, across the street
we
from.
need to get up on that.
Across the street from the Trump Tower,
right.
And there he is with Deputy Rosenstein and Rosenstein's deputy, and that was a strong message. You fire one of us, you fire 3 of us, and that's obstruction of justice. Case closed.
Jill, what do you think?
Well, I'd say this is the most fraught relationship in Washington, except there are so many.
Right. Tillerson, Trump, yeah.
I mean, it's just astonishing what these two have gone through, starting from the love fest at the beginning, and it's astonishing, as Eleanor says, that, you know, liberals are in Sessions' corner. I mean, you almost feel sorry for the guy.
Are you in Sessions' corner?
Well, I mean, I'm glad that he's standing up to this. He was right to recuse himself from the investigation, and he's right to not act like Trump's personal lawyer. Right. So, yeah.
I mean, Ben, there is a sort of problem here, isn't there, in terms of the American example of the judiciary that the president is hitting, or not?
You know, I've never been a fan of Jeff Sessions, and I'm not a fan of him in this instance either. I mean, the fact of the matter is that inspectors general typically, historically in Washington, stand up and defend the agencies that they are a part of. They basically are designed to give a cover story for a lot of different behavior on the part of these different agencies and bureaus. And I think in this instance, the level of abuse that has been alleged by members of the Congress and that has been laid out, I think, over the past couple of months in a very clear way, deserves a level of investigation that is higher than an inspector general. We are not talking about abuse of funds or someone traveling inappropriately or bringing their wife along on some kind of codel that they shouldn't have. This is something that's a lot higher than that, and I think it requires a more significant investigation.
It's not a lot higher. It's a bunch of partisan falderall. It's highly political,
Eleanor,
and you have a lot of Republicans who don't agree with
Eleanor,
you either. The restaurant, by the way, is Central.
Okay.
Eleanor, I never would have thought we would see the day when you would stand up defending Jeff Sessions in favor of a
rule of law.
FISA court as a rule of law? You really believe that?
There's a tremendous scandal on the other side here. And what this British spy, why has he not been indicted, for heaven's sake?
For what?
Interfering in an American election, working with Russians? He's not even being investigated by the Attorney General?
news flash. Richard Steele was a long-time Christopher Steele was a long-time cooperating agent with the FBI. They trusted his work.
He was a collaborator.
We have very many issues. We have to move on. We have to move on. We have very many issues today. It's a very exciting day for all of us here. Okay. Issue 2, Trump's tariffs.
In a shock announcement on Thursday, President Trump pledged that next week he'll introduce 25% tariffs on steel imports and 10% tariffs on imports of aluminium. This, the president says, will give redress to US-based industries who have struggled to compete with cheaper foreign exporters. But while the president's base is celebrating, others are concerned. They point to fears that the tariffs will drive up the costs of construction projects and invite a trade war with nations like China.
Yeah, well, so first there, that aluminium versus aluminum. I am a US citizen, but I thought the panel would love my eloquence there. Pat, what is going on with the tariffs?
Well,
is this a good idea?
Let's talk about the trade war with China. Last year, China ran up a $375 billion trade surplus with the United States, which is more than equal to its entire defense budget. We ran an $800 billion trade deficit. We've run $12 trillion in the last 25 years. If you want to know why America is in economic decline, these towns are emptying out, the factories are gone, the workers have had a job. If you don't get back to economic patriotism and economic nationalism, it's the end of the United States and the rise of China.
Great rhetoric, and it's been good for the last 15 or 20 years, except it doesn't have to do with today's reality. China's number 10 on the list of exporters of steel. We're damaging our allies. Canada gets hurt the worst. And I don't know that the president is even going to deliver on this. It is so foolhardy with, remember, Smoot-Hawley, that led into the Great Depression. If he continued with this policy, it would slow the economy.
Smoot-Hawley was passed 10 months after the stock market crash. Unemployment already hit 10%.
All right, enough of this Smoot-Hawley. Jill, what do you think here?
Well, you know, like so much else of what the president does, this could have a lot of consequences for his base. I mean, the retaliation is going to go against farmers and rural communities.
Marginal cost of living increases.
That's right. You know, Walmart prices go up, whatever goes up. And may I remind you what beer comes in, aluminum cans.
Right.
I mean, the price of beer is going to go up, and because they can't get enough domestic aluminum, and there's going to be layoffs at beer plants. You know, a beer company was on Twitter saying all this yesterday. So, and the other thing that's so troubling about this is the process that he went through to get to it, which apparently wasn't much of a process at all. I mean, we can take comfort in the fact that it's just a trade war and not a Korean war, but it's still, you know, this is not...
And yet, the president basically saying, you know, screw you to the bureaucratic process, which he has no patience for or understanding of, and Gary Cohn may well leave the White House, among many others looking for the exits.
Ben, but the question here, though, the president did run on this. He is delivering on something that he promised to do for the American people. So we can't be too angry with him, can we?
The president ran on a lot of things. so let's keep in mind, though, what the effect of this is going to be, because it's a ludicrous step. We saw this experience, frankly, under George W. Bush. When they dabbled in protectionism, when it came to their steel tariffs, you saw 200,000 jobs essentially lost in the American economy. The American economy, frankly, I disagree with Pat. I think it's actually doing quite well. We see the first wage growth that we've had really in almost a decade. We've seen you know, increases in terms of people getting back into the workforce and getting back in jobs. I think this runs the risk of that. That being said, I do think that the freak out over this has been a little bit overboard.
This is, you know,
this is not going to
about
ultimately
whether
lead to
the United States is going to restore its economic independence, economic patriotism, rather than being dependent upon other nations.
Would you have done this if you were president?
I would. Look, my view would have been start with a low tariff on all imports.
How much?
5%. At 5, 10, 15, 20. Use the revenue, cut taxes on all businesses in the United States. Companies would pour into the United States. Oh, this is what Trump did with cutting the corporate taxes. A good idea if you want to create jobs.
Well, nothing here was thought through. He did this at a moment when, according to reporting out of the White House, he was coming unglued because he was losing his communications director.
How it was handled.
He's angry at everybody. He's angry at his wife, at his son-in-law. He wants his son-in-law to go back to New York. I mean, this is not a policy that was well thought through.
Well, and then to say that trade wars are good and easy to win does not instill more confidence in this process.
But, you know, the trade wars have been conducted against us for 25 years. Yeah. What do you think's happened to America?
Yeah, but if he wants to fight back against China, that's not who he's ensnaring in the net this time.
Well, maybe the secret thing here, maybe the secret thing is that the president is trying to exert pressure on China in some way so that they exert pressure on Pyongyang. Maybe. Anyway, well. Issue 3, cyber retaliation.
I believe that President Putin has clearly come to the conclusion there's little price to play here.
Testifying to Congress this week, National Security Agency Director Mike Rogers warned that Russia has not faced significant consequences for its cyber offensives against the United States. This, Rogers suggested, has led Russian President Vladimir Putin to believe that he can act with relative impunity. And note something else. Responding to a question from Democratic Senator Jack Reed, Rogers said that the NSA would require new authorization from President Trump in order to take more aggressive action against Russia.
If granted the authority, and I don't have the day-to-day authority to do that.
Ben, should the president be authorizing the NSA to kick back against the Russians, to turn the lights off in the Kremlin?
Well, I'd like to see what the definition of more aggressive action is. Because from my perspective, if you look back at what the Russians did very clearly and what they've done, frankly, since late 2014 when it comes to their engagement in trying to tilt elections, not just in America, but in other countries as well, using their ability on the internet, it's actually something that's quite obvious and rather clumsy. It's very sort of easy to see when it's happening. In fact, during the primaries in late 2015 and early 2016, we at the Federalist had multiple reports about kind of these very obvious Russian-based accounts that engaged in kind of clumsy behavior to sort of boost various candidates. From my perspective, the question would be, well, what does aggressive action look like on the part of the NSA? How can we be confident that what you're going to do is not going to be the kind of foolhardy and very obvious behavior that the Russians engaged in at the time?
And Pat, but Pat, isn't the issue here though that part of the Russians being so obvious was that they want to see where the red line is for the United States, and they haven't found it yet.
Well, but look, what I think, look, you're going to have to not allow this to go on, or you're going to have to respond, but gee, it is certainly time the United States, I know there's Russophobia all over this town, that we sit down and talk to the Russians, tell them we got problems here, we can work in Syria, Ukraine, I don't think we should have sent the Javelin missiles. We have all these problems with Russia that frankly during the Cold War, whether it's Ike or Nixon or Reagan, they wanted to sit down and talk to the Russian leader.
Right, but this is the worst time in Russia-U.S. relations basically since the Cold War, and the president has no credibility in talking to Russians, and Putin just had this show that he put on with a cruise missile, nuclear-powered, headed for Florida. It's though he's trying to lure the president into a new arms race.
He's trying to say
Joe, all right.
And I wouldn't be surprised if Trump responds, because for him everything is personal.
Pave the way for me to let me in. I think the more important issue is the election infrastructure and the hacking into our state election systems, which are not hardened, targets or anything like that. And, so not only is the president not kind of standing up and saying we're going to make sure that they don't divide us any more than we're already divided, but we're going to strengthen our election infrastructure, we're going to strengthen our system so that people can trust the results of our elections. But he's not doing it.
But Jill, states are in charge of those systems, not the federal.
But should the federal government take more of a role?
The Homeland Security Department has cleared a critical infrastructure.
I understand, but I still believe that in this case, you actually have a president who, ironically, to Eleanor's point, has been much more forceful in terms of his relationship with the Russians than what we saw under President Obama. And I think that the Javelin missiles is another sign of that.
It's totally unproductive, his relationship with the Russians.
He has been boxed in because of this election scandal and because of the obvious sort of behavior of the Russians.
And that's not good for the country. His hands have been tied exactly right. Look, the country voted to get along, try to get along with the Russians.
President Trump, he can't deal with the Russians because he's got an investigation going into possible collusion with the Russians. So you're blaming the FBI and the investigation as opposed to the president.
How evil Putin is. You have built Putin up as though he turned the American election. He's a tremendous hero.
Are you not worried about the hypersonic jets that he illustrated in his little video this week?
Cruise missile?
The flying through orbit at
Well,
Mach 5.
Who started this by getting rid of the ABM treaty? George W. Bush. I mean, if you take a look at what Putin did, a lot of it is totally reactive.
Don't you think
Joe.
it's extraordinary that an NSA director is on TV saying,
Right.
I would like more authority to do more to
I believe
counter
the
this
NSA
threat?
always wants more authority.
Every
no matter the
agency wants
situation.
more power and authority, but the
I
question...
just find it astonishing that he feels he doesn't have what he needs to do what he wants to do.
I think if there's any satisfaction in this, I think the Russians are as disappointed in this relationship as we are.
It was a poor investment.
But you can't, the
Very
NSA
quick.
can't alone interfere in Russians' elections without the president's
Right.
permission.
Democratic
For heaven's
authority
sakes.
in the end is very important. All right, when we come back, Hope's had it and the immortal she. And as always, tell your friends to watch us at McLaughlin.com. We will see you in a minute.
March 10th, go all in at the 13th annual Chance for Life, DC's premier charity event hosted by MGM National Harbor, presented by Boeing. Featuring a thrilling charity poker tournament, a tasting experience with DC's top chefs, and Vegas-style party, Chance for Life directly benefits pediatric cancer research at Children's National and through Alex's Lemonade Stand Foundation, because every child deserves a chance for life. For tickets and information, visit chanceforlife.net.
Issue 4, Hope's had it.
Shaking up Washington's Wednesday evening rush hour, White House Communications Director Hope Hicks announced that she'll step down from her position in the coming weeks. Although just 29 years old, Ms. Hicks is one of President Trump's most trusted advisors. Indicating as much, the president reacted to her resignation by stating, quote, "Hope is outstanding and has done great work for the last 3 years," end quote. Still, with Hicks leaving and the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, also losing his top secret security clearance this week, Mr. Trump's senior advisor, Old Guard, seems under increasing pressure.
Like the old guard at the Battle of Waterloo being broken finally, do you think here this is Hope Hicks a signifier of a White House in freefall?
Well, either that or she's just the latest communications director to crash and burn. You know, and to do it in a way that makes it seem like either she isn't good at her job right after this white lies thing came out, or that she's, you know, that Trump is really his own communications director, which I think is the problem.
Who do you think is next to go?
Who's next to go? Well, Gary Cohn seems like he's, you know, he lost the tariffs battle, and so the economics advisor will be the next to go, I
Sessions,
think.
Tillerson, there are a whole list. It could
Well,
be.
I mean, it could be anyone. I mean, look at Ben Carson these days.
Right.
Remember him?
Hicks is an intensely private person. She was the communications director who never spoke in public, and she was sucked into the vortex of Trump world. The revelation that she was involved in the powwow on Air Force One that crafted a statement about that meeting in Trump Tower that was not correct, and then the Rob Porter scandal where she helped craft a statement that he was an upstanding citizen.
Is this the white lies issue? Is that why she's going?
And then lastly was the white lies.
You know,
everybody who knows her says she's been thinking about leaving now for some period of time. But it is unthinkable that she could have stayed in the White House. She dropped a bomb on this president with that white lies.
You know, but
statement.
you know, I think the loss of Hope Hicks is so close to Trump.
Right.
Then the possibility he's going to lose his daughter and son-in-law, Jared. I think this has been very wounding and enraged him. And then you hear that McMaster may go out of the NSC. So I can understand Trump's sentiment, because these people were very, these people
latest
were
story says he
closest
was-
people
But-
to
all
him.
right,
Let's
but
Ben in,
we're missing
Ben
the
in.
biggest factor here, which is that Hope Hicks was bad at her job. She deserved to lose her job from the moment that she allowed that New York Times interview on Air Force One, when there was no one else in the room but her, that was supposed to be an off-the-record meet and greet and turned into a lengthy story at the time. That absolutely should have led to her dismissal at the end of the day.
Is it time to bring back Scaramucci?
I would love to see Anthony Scaramucci back, because he actually is the mini-me for Donald Trump.
Scaramucci?
But Pat, I have to ask you, when you were at the White House, did you ever have the Daily Mail paid to be paparazzi outside of your apartment complex to watch you come and go and who you were going to dinner with?
We called them death watches at the end of a number,
Because that's
a number of
that is-
driveways.
that is
as
what-
soon as you got into the Washington Post, they were there with the
That is
cameras.
what Hope Hicks experienced, and it is because she is an attractive woman, and the Daily Mail was obsessed with her. They paid dozens of cameramen to follow her all around Washington, D.C., and the fact of the matter is, I think that meant that she was destined to leave no matter what.
I didn't hear about that, but they did break the Rob Porter story,
That
and
story broke
that's a legitimate story.
But that story broke because they had a sequence of stories where they had sent photographers to take pictures of them at dinner.
Anthony Scaramucci is out there saying that the White House is being run like martial law.
Well,
he's got the knives out for General Kelly.
Joe, Joe, do you think the Chief of Staff, John Kelly, is he staying? I mean, this doesn't speak terribly highly to his Marine leadership, does it?
No, I don't think he's doing a good job at all. On the other hand, if Trump decided he'd had it and pulled another, I'm sick of it, I'm done with it, this is an easy war to win, then who would he get? I mean, at this point, if people don't stay, who's going to want to come and step in?
Not only is John Kelly staying, this was him establishing how firm of a grip he has on the White House today, saying you will not cross
Jared.
Well, the story is that the president really wants Jared and his daughter to go back to New York.
Yeah. Well,
then they're going back to New York.
Yeah, maybe this is John Kelly at Okinawa Chosin Reservoir pushing through. Issue 5, the immortal Xi.
Shaking up the international political scene this week, President Xi Jinping of China scrapped his nation's term limits and signaled his intent to rule for the foreseeable future. Xi, regarded as the most influential Chinese leader since Mao Zedong, now seems set to continue his agenda of building his nation's economic hegemony, its territorial reach, and its military power.
Pat Buchanan, is Xi going to be the new ruler of the new world order?
Well, I think the new world order, if you talk about East Asia expanding, but look, this in the long run is the real serious great challenge of the United States. It's a mighty power, 1.4 billion people. It's got an economy already probably 10 times the size of Russia, 10 times as many people. So I think, America, and this is what's going to happen, I think. The United States is going to be engaged by China, and their objective is basically to push us back over to our side of the Pacific.
Well, I think it is a rivalry that's going to continue, and that the Chinese in the end may well win. I think the president has really withdrawn enough from the international stage that he's made it easy for Xi to extend Chinese influence. But I want to say, Xi is no Mao. Mao was a revolutionary and a demigod. Xi is a very skilled and successful bureaucrat and technocrat. He's perfect for today's age, and I think the Chinese are probably correct in extending his tenure. But to extend it into the future without any end is very scary.
But think about what that does for you as a leader. If you think about China in terms of this long-term goal, as they do think there, I think that this is the type of thing that gives you the license to consider expanding and taking back territory that you believe ought to belong to China in a significant way, and gives you the license to do so with the understanding that there will be no challenge to your leadership.
And Jill, this is one of these areas, obviously tariffs and all this stuff, but Taiwan has, what do you think? Do you think Xi is going to be invading places?
Well, I think when it happened, I thought this is another world leader for Donald Trump to envy. American leaders have tried to do this. I guess Rudy Giuliani tried to be mayor for life, and it didn't work out. And then Michael Bloomberg actually got extra time, and but the voters in New York voted and said, no, we're not doing this anymore. It's very interesting, the dynamic in China, because it's so similar to here, where you have coastal elites and people in the heartland who think that they're very happy with the strength that he's projecting. And as long as this is working for him politically, and it is, I think we are going to see a lot of this. And it would be nice to have a president who had not withdrawn from the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and who was making America a force there in trade and other ways. But I think, and we had the Chinese ambassador come to talk to us, and it was all about, we're only concerned with our own country and our own interests.
But Ben's point is well taken. Look, in the long run, Chinese lost territory to Russia in the middle of the 19th century. Early in the Nixon administration, they almost went to nuclear war with each other. He's going to reabsorb all of these territories that belong to the greater China and keep growing and growing.
Is he invading Taiwan soon? That's heating up.
They're circumnavigating it with planes and ships right now, intimidating it. And Taiwan is tightly tied to China now by trade. So, I don't think will the Americans go to war for Taiwan? I don't think so.
Then the Chinese will expand their trading influence while the U.S. shrinks from the world stage.
Yeah, well, all right. I think one issue, though, we are going to have to, it's that South China Sea, those island constructions. You limit the trade flows there with the anti-ship missiles. That's going to be the great challenge. You essentially win without the fight. It's the Japanese in the 30s without invading. Well, we'll see. Anyway, we'll be right back with predictions.
March 10th, go all in at the 13th Annual Chance for Life, DC's premier charity event hosted by MGM National Harbor, presented by Boeing. Featuring a thrilling charity poker tournament, a tasting experience with DC's top chefs, and Vegas-style party, Chance for Life directly benefits pediatric cancer research at Children's National and through Alex's Lemonade Stand Foundation, because every child deserves a chance for life. For tickets and information, visit chanceforlife.net.
Predictions, Pat Buchanan.
Tom, the South African Parliament has just voted to confiscate white farms, white-owned farms, without any compensation. If this goes through, investment in South Africa will dry up, people will leave it, and the place will head in the same direction as Zimbabwe wound up. That's what will happen to Mandela, South Africa.
Very quickly, what do you think they're thinking with that?
Oh, but they got Malema. The young guy is he's very tough.
But Zuma, you know, left. And
well, Zuma's gone, but the young guy is pushing him. The ANC, and he's outside the ANC.
The far left, yeah. Eleanor?
The investigative phase of the Mueller investigation is over. He's got all the information he needs. People who've been in there are stunned at how much he knows. Now he's building his case. And the fact that he indicted Rick Gates for lying on February 4th or 5th sends the message that you don't tell the truth to Mueller, you're going to be indicted.
But Trump still has the pardon power.
It would be untenable for Hope Hicks to stay in the White House after what she said to the House committee.
Okay, Jill.
In a couple of months, maybe as late as May or June, Jared and Ivanka are going to make an announcement that their children terribly miss their friends in New York, and that they are just going to have to leave Washington and move back for their children. And
do you think the president, how will he react to that? We'll see some tweets.
I think we'll see some tweets about how wonderful it is that they're putting family first.
Right. Ben?
Jimmy Kimmel will host the Academy Awards tonight on ABC. He will preside over a very partially political Academy Awards, but be criticized for not speaking to the elephant in the room, which is Harvey Weinstein and everything that has come across given that scandal. He is one of the most political actors in American culture today.
Okay, very good. I predict that Clarence will be back next week. Clarence, we hope you're good. Until then, enjoy putting your legs up. And here's a random fact. 217 years ago today, Thomas Jefferson was sworn in as the nation's third president. In his inaugural address, Jefferson spoke to the mission of this show. "Let us restore to social intercourse," Jefferson said, "that harmony and affection without which liberty and even life itself are but dreary things." Thank you very much, panelists, for an enjoyable show. We hope you will join us next week, but until then, make sure to follow us on Twitter at McLaughlin Group and visit our website, mclaughlin.com, where your friends can watch this show, Pakar, which is Russian for goodbye. Bye.